Back together again with another scripture discovery session. We are continuing on in our Proverbs series and on the topic of the tongue. Before we go through these verses together, let me apologize if I have confused you last week and again this week, because in the past I've said that I would be following the schedule at the Converge site. Last week I made a mistake, and this video should have been up on the YouTube channel last week. This is the topic that Joe preached, and I think he taught the Sunday school class as well. So I apologize for that. I'll try to get it right the next time. Anyways, let me read through these verses with you. Let me remind you to print out these passages. Make sure you have a pen or pencil and some highlighters, and let's engage with the Word of God together. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. Chapter 12, verse 18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Chapter 12, verse 25. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. Proverbs 15, verse 4. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perseverance in it breaks the spirit. Chapter 4, verses 23 and 24. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech, and put devious talk far from you. Proverbs 15, verse 28. The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. Just a heads up as we go through these verses, they are not in a random order. Pastor Joe put them in this order for a reason. And as we go through these together, hopefully we will find out his reasoning behind it. All right, Proverbs 18, verse 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. All right, so I'm going to start by highlighting death and life and make those two distinct colors. And they are in the power of the tongue. I should probably circle tongue. And notice it's in the power of the tongue. And continuing on, and those who love it will eat its fruits. I'm going to mark it and point it back to the tongue. That's what it's talking about. Those who love the tongue will eat its fruits. I'm going to circle fruits. Fruits are the result of the tongue as it speaks, and it's basically pointing back to death and life. We might as well underline the phrase, those who love. I'm wondering if it's those who love to talk and love to talk often. They will eat of its fruit, either death or life. All right, jumping down to Chapter 12, verse 18, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts. So I'll highlight rash words and underline sword thrusts. It's giving us a picture of what rash words are like, so we'll mark the word like, comparing rash words to sword thrusts. And let's mark the word but as a contrast. The tongue of the wise brings healing. We're going to highlight tongue of the wise and underline healing. Healing is the result. I think I'm going to change verse 21 real quick. Instead of circling fruits, I am going to underline fruits with a red line and a yellow line. Which means that chapter 12, verse 18, we see those sword thrusts, which is representing pain and suffering and death. That is a fruit of your words, specifically rash ones. And then, of course, the tongue of the wise brings healing, which is another result or fruit. So now as we go through the rest of these proverbs, we'll underline the fruits of the tongue in either a red line or yellow line. All I'm doing is just trying to give you the method of my madness. Okay, jumping to chapter 12, verse 25. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. In order to make sense of this proverb, I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to start with the last phrase with the contrast. So we're going to mark the word but and highlight good word and underlining glad. And so what is the contrast of the good word and gladness? Well, I think this starts with anxiety, so I'm going to highlight that in red, and underline weighs him down. So we see the parallels with the two lines. Weighing him down or making him depressed or sad is what this proverb is describing. And then, of course, gladness is the contrast. And it's interesting that anxiety is in contrast with the good word. So anxiety is more of a emotional state. It's what you're feeling inside, whereas the good word is an action that we do, speaking out something that is good. But I think it's important for us to see a relationship between the two. And we should probably mark the phrase man's heart. I'll circle it. And again, it's describing what is going on in the heart of man versus taking verbal action. All right, we'll keep moving on. Proverbs 15, verse 4. A gentle tongue is a tree of life. We'll highlight gentle tongue, underline tree of life. And of course, the first thing that pops up in my mind is Genesis. In the Garden of Eden, there is the tree of life. And of course, the tree of life is in Revelation as well. The second line, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. So we'll mark but and highlight perverseness and underline breaks the spirit. I guess we could mark the word it. And it's obvious that it's talking about the tongue. I'm sure you've already recognized this trait about me, but I do like to recognize some of the obvious things because I know for myself, when I just read through the scriptures, sometimes it's the obvious things that I pass over quickly and fail in taking time to reflect on it. All right, now we are in chapter 4, verses 23 and 24. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. So this starts with a command to keep your heart. I'm going to highlight that word keep as a command and circle the phrase your heart. Again, it's obvious, but I do want to make the connection to chapter 12, verse 25, where it's talking about man's heart. And instead of a contrast, there is a reason for keeping your heart. And that is because from it flow the springs of life. So I'm going to mark the word for and circle it just to show that it's talking about the heart. From it flow springs of life. I'm going to underline that phrase, springs of life. And moving to verse 24, put away from you crooked speech. We'll highlight put away and crooked speech. And, which is a comparison, put devious talk far from you. I'll highlight put as a command and highlight devious talk. And I think I'm going to highlight the word far. So put far is the command. Notice how these two verses are structured compared to our previous Proverbs, where there is a contrast. So let me make a few notes on the side of this proverb. Now this we know from Proverbs 18 verse 21 that death and life are in the power of the tongue. And I think this is what verse 24 is indicating. And of course we know that the opposite of crooked speech and devious talk, which is good words, or in chapter 15 verse 4, a gentle tongue, or even in chapter 12, verse 18, the tongue of the wise, they bring healing and gladness and life. Which means, so far, what I see is a connection with man's heart and the tongue, and whatever we speak is either life-giving or bringing death. It either raises up or tears down. Okay, let's keep moving along. Our last proverb, chapter 15, verse 28. The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. We're going to highlight heart of the righteous, and the heart of the righteous ponders, and then the contrast, but the mouth of the wicked we will highlight, and it pours out evil things. So ponders and pours. We'll just circle evil things. And I guess we'll circle answer as well, just to point out the contrast between the two. And just to make it obvious, put in the phrase good things, which is in contrast to the evil things. So in this proverb, you see similarities and differences. The heart of the righteous, the mouth of the wicked. You can kind of switch those around and say the heart of the wicked does the opposite of pondering how to answer. So the heart of the wicked doesn't think about what it's going to say. They're not careful with their words. And the mouth of the righteous pours out good things. And of course, after they take time in thinking through how to speak wisely and to speak in a way that lifts up instead of tears down. All right, jumping back up to the top and looking at Proverbs 18, verse 21, it seems to me this is the main verse, and all the rest kind of unpack what chapter 18, verse 21 is revealing. So I'm going to mark this as the summary verse. In some way, the rest of these verses are unpacking the fruit that comes from speaking, whether it's death or life. We see that rash words cut like a knife. The tongue of the wise heals. So those are two fruits. Chapter 12, verse 25, a good word brings gladness, and I think the opposite is the anxiety, and specifically the man's heart. But you can contrast good word with anxiety in the sense that maybe how someone speaks, whether they're complaining or fretting over something with their words, will also weigh them down. And that's just pointing back to their heart when that happens. Proverbs 15:4, the gentle tongue is a tree of life. Perverseness breaks the spirit. Here in Proverbs 4, it's giving one side, which is the crooked speech and devious talk, but we can also imply then that good speech will provide life. And in Proverbs 15, verse 28, we see that the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things, and we can connect that with death. And in contrast, the heart of the righteous, or the righteous who speak, they will speak good things which will bring life. All right, and let me just point out what is jumping out at me. Again, it's the relationship between the heart, the mouth, and what it speaks. So I'm going to kind of write this out to help us make sense of it. Just kind of helps me see where it all begins. It begins in the heart, and the tongue helps us identify what's in the heart by what it speaks, either life or death. So the root issue is the heart, and that is something we need to consider as we use our words. And the things that we say are very important. They identify what's in the heart, and our words have a powerful effect. And I would say that applies for ourselves in what we speak and how it brings us life or death, or towards others and what they hear come out of our mouths. Our words can raise people up or bring them low. Anyways, I know this is a short video, but I hope it was helpful. And my prayer is that as we do these videos together, it'll prepare our hearts for hearing the preached word during the Sunday morning service. Pastor Joe will be preaching at Sawyer, Highlands, and be going through these passages. And I will be at Converge preaching on humility. That service starts at 11 a.m., and we'll have our Sunday school class at Converge at 10 a.m. All right, with that, may God bless you and keep you throughout the week.